The stage of Sunday Night Football brings much more than a simple Week 2 matchup as the Vikings and Falcons arrive after debuts that told completely different stories. Minnesota showed mental strength to come from behind and win a road game against the Bears, while Atlanta let a victory slip away at home against the Buccaneers. The spotlight will be on the meeting between J.J. McCarthy and Penix Jr., but the decision goes far beyond the quarterbacks. Offensive line, defensive pressure, and the running game weigh directly on the balance of the contest. It is in these details that the Vikings find room to step onto the field as favorites. Stay in this video to understand how the Vikings transform these factors into superiority against the Atlanta Falcons and why they enter as favorites to claim their second straight win of the season. In the debut against the Bears, McCarthy experienced a complete learning curve. He attempted only 20 passes, but his 65% accuracy, 2 touchdowns through the air, and 1 rushing touchdown into the end zone showed the versatility of the rookie in the regular season. Even with 1 interception and 3 sacks taken, he demonstrated the ability to absorb pressure and respond with rhythm in the fourth quarter, leading 3 consecutive drives that turned the game around, which revealed a maturity that emerged decisively in the final quarter. Even with 1 interception and 3 sacks taken, he showed the ability to absorb pressure and respond with rhythm in the fourth quarter, leading 3 consecutive drives that turned the game around. Penix, on the other hand, even surpassing the 290-yard mark and completing 64.3% of his passes against Tampa Bay, faced consistency issues as 1 passing touchdown and another on the ground were not enough to make up for the team's low rushing productivity and the offensive line's inability to sustain long drives. The Minnesota Vikings produced 254 total yards on just 49 plays, an average of 5.2 per snap, with balance between running and passing. Chicago even added more yards with 317, but the Vikings' defense held Caleb Williams to 5.7 yards per attempt. Atlanta, meanwhile, despite piling up 358 total yards against the Buccaneers, wasted possessions with short drives, converted only 40% of third downs, and failed to capitalize in key moments. The contrast lies in efficiency, as the Vikings scored touchdowns on 2 of their 3 trips to the red zone at 67%, while the Falcons converted only 1 of 2 at 50%. In the running game, the advantage also leans toward the Vikings. Jordan Mason led Minnesota with 68 yards on 15 carries, averaging 4.5 per attempt, while Aaron Jones added 23 yards but compensated with a receiving touchdown. The collective average of 4.6 per carry against the Bears shows how the offensive line, even under pressure, managed to open lanes at the right moments. On the other side, Atlanta stalled as Tyler Allgeier averaged 2.4 per attempt and Bijan Robinson only 2.0, totaling 69 yards on 28 carries. The inability to sustain the ground game placed excessive weight on Penix, who was forced to throw 42 times. This imbalance tends to be exploited by Brian Flores, who already generated 30 pressures on Caleb Williams in Week 1. In the battle of the trenches, the difference is even more evident. The Vikings front, led by Javon Hargrave, recorded 2 sacks and 6 tackles for loss against Chicago, holding running back DeAndre Swift to 3.1 per attempt. Flores' plan is based on multiplying pre-snap looks, confusing the reads of young quarterbacks. Penix, although showing maturity gained from his long college career, still faces processing limitations against complex schemes. The absence of right tackle Caleb McGarry, who suffered an injury, forces Atlanta to improvise with Elijah Wilkinson, and that opens gaps for Minnesota to exploit mismatches in the pass rush. Among the skill players, the contrast lies in how each offense capitalizes on opportunities. The Falcons rely heavily on running back Bijan Robinson as a dual threat, with 100 receiving yards and a touchdown in Week 1, in addition to Drake London's 15 targets that resulted in only 55 yards. The production exists in volume, but not in explosive efficiency. The Vikings, on the other hand, even without overwhelming numbers, showed decisive impact as Justin Jefferson scored with only 44 yards, but his presence opened space for Aaron Jones's deep reception and Mason's physical running game. The offense did not need inflated stats to turn a game in a hostile environment, a sign that execution was calibrated in critical moments. When turnovers and situational efficiency are crossed, Minnesota once again stands out. Against Chicago, the team committed only 1 turnover and forced another, balancing the margin but maintaining emotional control in the final minutes. Atlanta, although not recording turnovers against Tampa Bay, struggled with the inability to convert key downs and with the kicker's failure on the final field goal. These details make the difference in primetime, as the Vikings showed resilience, while the Falcons showed fragility. Recent history also carries weight. Minnesota has won 6 of the last 7 head-to-head matchups, including the 42-21 victory at US Bank Stadium in 2024. McCarthy comes in energized by what could already be the turning point of his career in his debut, while Penix still needs to prove he can turn good individual stats into wins. The combination of home field advantage, greater offensive balance, and Brian Flores' aggressiveness puts the Vikings in position to exploit exactly the weaknesses Atlanta exposed against the Buccaneers. Projecting the matchup at US Bank Stadium, the direct comparison between McCarthy and Penix remains the central focus of the analysis. The difference is not only in raw statistics, but in how each interacts with the system around them. McCarthy, in just 20 passes against the Bears, showed that he does not need volume to be efficient, as 2 touchdown connections in critical situations and an average of 10.3 yards per reception illustrate an offense capable of creating impact without relying on risky calls on every snap. Penix, even with nearly 300 passing yards against Tampa Bay, saw his production dissipate in short sequences, requiring 42 attempts for only 1 passing touchdown. In terms of scouting, this reveals what coaches call empty yards, movement on the field without converting into decisive advantage. The running game reinforces the trend as Minnesota, even without long explosive plays, achieved consistency with 120 yards on 26 carries, averaging 4.6, enough to sustain drives even when the passing game was not connecting. This balance is reflected in the fact that the Vikings are able to distribute first downs between runs and passes, not becoming reliant on just one offensive dimension. Atlanta, on the other hand, collapsed in this area, averaging only 2.5 yards per attempt against Tampa Bay, with Robinson and Allgeier unable to find space. This data is critical because it places the responsibility on Penix to extend plays without the support of a functional ground game. And against Brian Flores' defense, this is dangerous territory. Defensively, the Vikings showed attributes that directly exploit the Falcons' weaknesses, recording 6 tackles for loss against the Bears in addition to 2 sacks. The constant pressure, even when not resulting in a sack, forced accelerated reads from Caleb Williams. The same scenario is expected to repeat against Atlanta as the offensive line protection weakened without Caleb McGarry. The improvisation with Wilkinson on the right side creates a clear point of attack for Hargrave and company. Minnesota's front has the versatility to align 7 or 8 players on the line, masking blitzes and confusing cadences, something that can destabilize a quarterback still adapting to the NFL pace. On the perimeter, Minnesota's secondary also showed signs of solidity. Against Chicago, it limited DJ Moore to 68 yards and neutralized vertical threats, keeping Williams' average to just 6 yards per attempt. Atlanta, even with London receiving 15 targets, was unable to turn them into explosive plays, finishing the night with 55 yards. The wide receiver's shoulder injury increases the burden on Robinson and Pitts as primary targets. This scenario makes the defense's job easier, allowing them to focus on containing Bijan's versatility as a receiver without having to compromise structure against intermediate passes. Another factor to consider is situational efficiency, as Minnesota, even converting only 25% of third downs against Chicago, compensated with effectiveness in the red zone and the ability to execute big plays in the fourth quarter. Atlanta converted 40% of third downs against Tampa Bay, but failed to maintain momentum, especially when needing to respond under pressure. Koo's missed final field goal is not just a footnote, as it exposes how the Falcons still lack reliability in critical moments, to the point of already adding Parker Romo to the roster as competition. The atmosphere at US Bank Stadium should not be underestimated either, as the crowd noise is part of the tactical plan, enhancing defensive aggressiveness and making communication along the opposing offensive line more difficult. Penix, who already had to throw 42 times at home to keep his team alive, will now have to deal with a hostile environment in primetime. McCarthy, on the other hand, will make his debut at the stadium as a starter, fueled by the confidence of a road comeback. The narrative of the rookie who showed resilience connects with the team's history, having already won 14 games in 2024 and retained much of the core roster for this season. The Week 1 data crossover reinforces the favoritism, as the Vikings show a better average of yards per play, more offensive balance, a more consistent run defense, and higher red zone efficiency. The Falcons display an unbalanced offense, a weakened offensive line, dependence on a single aerial playmaker, and inability to sustain long drives. It is a matchup that, both in the numbers and on tape, indicates a clear advantage for Minnesota against the Falcons in Week 2. Thank you for watching and see you soon.